Good afternoon, and thank you all for taking the time to tune in today to what promises to be a very rich and interesting discussion about clean energy innovation over the next 90 minutes. My name is Dr. Simon Bennett from the International Energy Agency, and I will guide you through the first set of speakers. The format of today's event will be two sessions. The first of these will feature several very high-level speakers, and it will include the India launch of the International Energy Agency's recent special report on clean energy innovation. This will be followed in a little over 30 minutes by a discussion among 6 expert panelists, and you'll be able to submit questions to these panelists using the chat function in GoToWebinar. Hopefully you will be able to see on your screens now the agenda for this first session. There we go. So we can see this very distinguished set of panelists. We have a stellar lineup for you today. And to begin proceedings, I would like to invite Dr. Renu Swarup, who is the Secretary of the Department of Biotechnology for the Government of India, to give some opening remarks. Dr. Swarup has headed DBT since 2018 and has had a very long and decorated career in this influential institution. As the head of DBT, she leads India's engagement in Mission Innovation, which is the global platform for international engagement on clean energy technologies. Dr. Swarup, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today for this very important accelerating clean energy innovations. I think this whole clean energy sector has become so important, and bringing innovations to this sector is something that all of us have been working on, but we are particularly keen to see this moving forward. It's a great pleasure to be here today because the Department of Biotechnology had signed the MOU with IEA, and I'm very pleased to see Mr. Birol here. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for your partnership. Thank you very much for taking forward all the key commitments that we made when we signed this MOU in 2018. I think the whole purpose of what we signed together was to see how we can build data, we can look at knowledge, we can see knowledge being translated into key innovations, and we can see key partnerships coming together to take those innovations ahead. This particular report, which is being launched today, the Energy Technology Perspectives Special Report on Clean Energy Innovations, has been brought out at a very, very appropriate time. India, as you know, is keenly looking at accelerating its entire innovation ecosystem. And clean energy forms a major component in it. Be it the healthcare sector, be it the energy sector, be it the agriculture sector. Our focus is on how do we take innovations to accelerate the development and deployment of new technologies, which can help mitigate societal challenges, but also to be able to bring in affordable and accessible key products, which are important for society. If you look at the whole innovation ecosystem, there are key pillars on which this innovation ecosystem is focused on. The most important one being the capacities. And these capacities come from the human resource and from the infrastructure that we build around them. The second most important pillar is the technology part of it. How do you leverage technology? How do you leverage the new technologies to be able to take forward whatever challenges you have and respond to those challenges? The third most important pillar is inclusiveness, working with all partners, bringing in national and global collaborations. This whole ecosystem that we have, and if you see the agenda for today's meeting, actually covers each one of them so beautifully. Government of India is committed not just to the innovation ecosystem, but to the clean energy sector. The mission innovation, for which we've been key partners, we've been engaged in all the various activities of the mission innovation, the first phase of it, and now deeply engaged in taking it forward to the second phase. I think the partnership that we've had with all stakeholders has been very important, and especially the partnership which IEA has brought forward to be where we are, to look at what the perspective is as we move forward. The Clean Energy Incubator that we set up, and I'm very pleased to see Mr. Sinha here and all your colleagues from the Tata Group, which has been a key partner along with the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, to set up this first of its kind Clean Energy Incubator. And I'm very pleased that this was the first of its kind, but which has set a wonderful example for all the mission innovation countries. Today, the Clean Energy Incubator has partnered with a large number of mission innovation countries. And I think the key challenges which are before this is now not to look at innovations which are, while we look at our own local innovations, but to look at innovations which are global. To see how innovations that we develop within the country can be deployed in other countries as well, and similarly try to look at challenges that we can take forward. I think I would just like to say here that this whole exercise that is being done by mapping the various innovation ecosystems, mapping the various technologies, mapping the stakeholders is key and crucial for us to be able to move into the next phase. The next phase of mission innovation, as we call Mission Innovation 2.0, is really looking now at different themes and different sectors. Government of India is going to be keenly engaged, and we are leading the bioeconomy mission. And this bioeconomy mission again would bring not just the circular economy, but many other components, and we'll have all countries which would be part of this system as we move along. The report that is being brought out today, and I'm sure the panel discussion which will follow this, will give us key insights as to how we should now look at the various components as we move on, because these are not going to be just in different themes, but they're going to be different themes across different sectors. So what really is the technology and energy perspective? What are the key challenges? What are the main gaps that we need to address? I think these are key issues which need to be brought out. These are key issues which need to be discussed, and also bringing together all the researchers from public, private, and the incubation ecosystem and the startups. So I'd like to conclude here by congratulating each one who's been part of this report preparation, for each one who's engaged in taking this whole ecosystem forward. Once again, thanking IEA, and once again, just saying this, that the Department of Biotechnology is very, very pleased to be your partners in this, to work with all our stakeholders, the Clean Energy Incubator, the entire group which is looking at it, and we'll be very pleased to identify specific actions as we move forward into the next phase. So congratulations once again, and thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Dr. Swarup, for these insightful comments, which I think cover almost all of the ground that we hope to explore in this afternoon's discussion, which is excellent. And I'm pleased to say that the uniqueness of the Clean Energy Incubator is highlighted in the report that the IEA has published. I would now like to give the floor for opening remarks to Mr. Praveer Sinha. He's the CEO and Managing Director of Tata Power Limited, which is India's largest integrated power company, serving 5 million customers. Mr. Sinha is a passionate advocate of clean energy and the power of new technologies, and Tata Power supports the Clean Energy International Incubation Center to nurture entrepreneurs in this area. Mr. Sinha, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Simon. I take the opportunity to welcome all the participants for the virtual conference. Clean energy is something which is very critical and important in today's world. More than 100 years back, Tata Power was set up with the objective to provide clean, abundant, and affordable energy. This remains a challenge even now, and especially when we see that there are nearly 0.6 billion people globally who do not have access of energy, and another 0.6 billion who have partial access of energy. And to them, it's important that we offer them solutions which can help them to meet their requirement of electricity going forward. The challenge before us is therefore, how do we bring clean and affordable energy? And this is more true, especially when we have to do it in rural areas where the rural economy is not able to grow in absence of the energy. And this is true for India, this is true for Sub-Sahara Africa, and this is also true for many parts of Southeast Asia. In this regard, first step was taken with support of Department of Science and Technology, DBT, BIRAC, wherein philanthropic organizations like Social Alpha and Tata Trust came, along with Tata Power and Tata Power Delhi Distribution, to create a platform of clean energy international incubation center. And the thrust of this was to bring technology and solutions which are usable in rural areas, can be used 24/7, and can give the opportunity and the ecosystem for the growth and development in these areas. The partnership that Clean Energy Incubation Center has with Mission Innovation is again a big opportunity to bring the global R&D and technology which can be used and customized for the local conditions in India and other parts of the world. We feel privileged to be part of this engagement, and we feel that going forward, this will be able to bring about a paradigm shift in the way the energy can be produced and used in rural areas. I'm sure with the collaboration of various institutions, academia, government, private sector, we'll be able to create an ecosystem which will push the agenda of not only clean energy, but also create opportunities to generate employment and development in the rural parts of India through micro enterprise. I think this can be a precursor to the micro enterprise development that we are seeing now, especially when COVID has impacted and many of our people have gone back to the villages. I think the need for clean energy and the solutions is much more, and the innovation mindset which is being created in this space will help us in meeting the objectives going forward. I look forward to work closely with all the stakeholders to take forward the agenda of clean energy and the steps that has been taken by DBT to tie up with International Energy Agency, and the solutions that they would be providing will be very, very helpful and unique for meeting the future energy requirements of this country. I'm sure with the type of work that is going on globally, along with Mission Innovation, Clean Energy Incubation Hub will be able to provide large number of startups and which will support in the clean energy agenda for the country. I wish all the best for the panel discussion and for the report that has been prepared by IEA, and I think this will be in the right spirit of taking clean energy solutions in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. It's been an honor to hear your remarks today, in particular about the opportunities for India and the opportunities for collaborative approaches to taking forward some of these topics. I hope that that's something that we will discuss further during the panel discussion. We will move now to our next item, which is a presentation from the International Energy Agency of the report that we have mentioned, the most recent report from the IEA on accelerating clean energy innovation. And we will start with introductory remarks from the IEA's Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, before moving to a presentation by Dr. Timo Gül, the Architect and Director of the report, who will present the findings. I know that Fatih is on a tight time schedule, and so it's very fortunate that he needs no introduction in energy circles. But during his leadership since 2015 at the IEA has embraced India as a member of the IEA family, and it has also now cemented its position as a global clean energy hub, including with the publication of this report. Dr. Birol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and many thanks for all of our Indian friends and colleagues for this occasion. Many thanks to you, Madam Secretary. It's great to see you again. And many thanks to Mr. Sinha for his kind words. And a great pleasure and privilege for the IEA to have the Principal Scientific Advisor. Thank you very much, sir, for joining our meeting. Now, we were also honored last week when we hosted the RK Singh, the Power Minister, at the IEA's Clean Energy Transition Summit. Many of you may know, but last week we brought around the world 40 ministers together to discuss how to accelerate clean energy transitions. And it is, as the newspapers, as the participants says, it is the largest energy and climate meeting this year. We had ministers from United States, Canada, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, all European countries. As I mentioned, India, China, Japan, all the ministers came together and we discussed how we can accelerate the clean energy transitions, especially in a time the world is facing the COVID challenge. I appreciated very much Minister Singh's excellent remarks and highlighting the very fact that despite India is facing major economic and health challenges, the motto of clean energy is still written with capital letters in New Delhi. And this meeting was followed around the world, about 1 million viewers. And as I told them after the Mr. Singh's speech, what is decided, what will be decided in New Delhi is not only important for the Indian citizens, but for the entire world, because India is moving to the center stage of global energy affairs because of the economic growth, because of population, industry, among others. In that respect, as my colleague Mr. Bennett mentioned, when I became head of the IEA, I put a special emphasis to our relationship with India, and I am very happy that in the year 2017, with at that time the power minister, Minister Goyal, and the Minister Pradhan, we announced India joining the IEA family. And very soon, hopefully, I will come to New Delhi in person and discuss the next steps in terms of India becoming a strategic partner for the IEA for many years to come. So when we discuss with Minister Singh and with all other Minister Goyal, Pradhan, and others, I always highlighted the importance of innovation, and this has been expressed in the MOU I was honored to sign with Minister Vardhan and Secretary Swarup August 2018. And Madam Secretary, I am very much looking forward to renew this MOU and making it even stronger. Now, coming back to global energy issues and looking at the clean energy, we at the IEA, we work with numbers. We talk about numbers, and when I look at the numbers, I see a major conflict or a gap, if you want to say so, between many countries setting ambitious climate targets and where the maturity of some of the clean energy technologies are. Because energy efficiency, renewable energies, they are two bedrocks of our clean energy push, but they alone will not be enough to reach our energy and climate targets. So therefore, innovation is key to see that some of the clean energy technologies who are not yet ready for the market becomes mature and becomes the part of the solution. Therefore, this disconnect between the political statements and what is happening on the innovation side is something that we thought we shed a light on. And it is the reason my colleague, Mr. Timur Gül, and his colleagues came together and looked at more than 400 technologies to measure how ready they are for the market, whether or not they are mature enough. And our analysis show that a big chunk of the clean energy technologies need an additional push. And we have looked all the technologies and we have identified a few of them which will be critical to reach our energy and climate goals. What are those? First of all, electrification. And here, a keyword is the batteries. This is number one. Another one is the carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Knowing the fact that today 80% of the energy mix is fossil fuels, which was the case 30 years ago, still 80%, CCUS is an important technology. The third one is the bioenergy. We think as a key priority here. Advanced biofuels, in a heavy industry is a very promising and important technology for us. And finally, hydrogen and electrolyzers. I know that India is looking at hydrogen very well because in one of my meetings, Mr. Singh asked me, Mr. Birol, can you send me an expert who can talk with me and my staff about hydrogen in depth? And I called, when I was in Delhi, I called Paris, Dr. Gül, to buy his ticket immediately to come to New Delhi. And he did so in a few days of time and briefed Mr. Minister and his team on hydrogen. So these are the four clean energy technologies we think one needs to put emphasis on. Of course, it's not exclusive, but they are important according to our view. So how we can accelerate this innovation? Not with words, not with studies, not with slides. Governments and the private sector needs to push. Madam Secretary rightly mentioned the critical importance and the major move of mission innovation. And I know that the Prime Minister Modi played a crucial role for mission innovation becoming a global issue. But one of the main targets of mission innovation was doubling the research and development in clean energy technologies. But when I look at the numbers that my colleagues have in this energy technology perspective report, and these are the numbers of Mr. Bennett, I am sure, in the last 10 years, the government budgets globally for R&D in clean energy technologies remained stable, no growth. No growth. 10 years, no growth in global R&D budget for clean energy. And India is one of the exceptions, which showed a significant growth in the last few years, and congratulations here. Let me finish my words with two final remarks. One, I look in the report, the entire report, of course, the excellent one, and it is received by all the ministers last week around the world with great enthusiasm. But I look at the report and read about the Clean Energy International Incubation Center. I really congratulate you for this initiative and for the uniqueness of this very initiative. In fact, when I look at the Indian context, together with this, I can say two other very unique schemes which I admire, and I say around the world, people know me, know this fact. One of them is the LED program of India, which was a major success, LED program, which we are giving as a model to other countries. For example, when I talked with the Indonesian minister the other day, I told how important the LED scheme with the results. Another one, I know it is not necessarily in the context of this meeting, but for me it is very important, the Ujjwala program. Ujjwala program bringing clean cooking to millions of Indians for them to breathe clean air. So, and like these two programs, LED and Ujjwala, and this incubation center is a unique initiative, and I wanted to congratulate the government of India and Tata wholeheartedly on behalf of the International Energy Agency. Finally, I want to finish to say that the innovation needs a big push from advanced economies, emerging countries, but hand in hand. Here, a fair cooperation between advanced and emerging countries is very important, and IEA is there to share the best practices among the advanced and emerging countries in a fair way and transfer the knowledge rightly and accurately from one country to another. In that context, once again, I thank Madam Secretary and Mr. Principal Scientific Advisor and the Tata management, the entire management, and Mr. Sinha. And you can rely on the IEA as a close friend of India in clean energy innovation and beyond. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Okay, we'll move now to the presentation of the report by Dr. Gul. I hope that the screen sharing will allow us to see his slide shortly. Can you see it? I hope that works. That works. Thank you very much. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Simon Bennett, and thank you, Secretary Dr. Swarup, Mr. Sinha, for Dr. Birol, of course, for the excellent introduction to this launch event today. It's a great pleasure for us, for the International Energy Agency, to launch the report to the Indian audience today, and we're obviously very much privileged to see Dr. Vijay Raghavan today with us here at this important event. We have in fact worked with many international colleagues on this particular report. It's obviously a daunting task to mention and thank all of them, but thank you very much to all our Indian colleagues who have been working with us over many years on innovation and various related topics. Many thanks also to Mr. Kumar from TERI for working with us on this particular report. Very happy to see him on today's event. Now, we all are aware, of course, that innovation is a very important pillar for a more sustainable, more secure energy future for a variety of different aspects. Innovation helps to make energy more affordable. It can help to address Timur, I don't know if the other participants can hear you. I've lost the sound from your side.
It seems to be restored. Can you still hear me now?
That's fine now.
Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Dr. Birol already mentioned, the background to our work is, of course, that governments and industries have been making and continue to be making very ambitious long-term pledges, most notably to reach net zero emissions from the energy sector in the coming decades. These are very laudable efforts, of course, but what we're seeing is that there is a disconnect in between the ambitions that are being brought forward and the pace of technology progress that we are seeing in some of the critical sectors, in particular in long distance transport, so ships, planes, trucks, but also heavy industries, thinking about cement, chemicals, and steel here. As Dr. Birol mentioned, renewables and energy efficiency are critical pillars of low carbon transition as we're moving forward, making our energy sector cleaner and more secure. But when it comes to decarbonizing or addressing technology areas in these type of sectors, they by themselves will not be sufficient. What you need in these kind of sectors are new technologies that enable deep electrification, in particular new advanced battery chemistries moving forward. We need carbon capture for use and storage. We need different ways of producing clean hydrogen and using clean hydrogen, and we need several forms of bioenergy if the ambition is to fully decarbonize the energy sector moving forward. Many of these technology approaches have very complex value chains, and in many cases, the technologies involved still need a significant innovation push. Now, obviously, we're in a very complicated environment right now on the back of the COVID crisis, and there are two possible ways, of course, to look at COVID-19 when it comes to innovation. One is the most obvious one. COVID-19 can present a possible setback because government budgets to support RD&D might be tighter, and because the same applies to corporate players. We have run a survey, in fact, with a couple of key industries in the run-up to this report, and we found this concern definitely be supported. The other way of looking at COVID-19 is obviously to remind ourselves of the important role that governments play in energy innovation. Energy innovation happens in the labs, happens across various different players out there, but governments have a key role in steering energy technology innovation, and in that, obviously, COVID-19 can be an opportunity to revisit, realign R&D portfolios in line with the long-term goals that each and every single country has for itself. Now, the reality today, and Dr. Birol already mentioned that in passing, is that public energy R&D spending in technology areas that are key priorities for achieving net zero emissions is well below that of other areas. Today, we are spending around $25 billion per year on energy-related public R&D spending into low-carbon technologies, of which around $17 trillion goes into applied research in specific technology areas. And when you break this down into what are the key technology areas that we are currently supporting globally, then what we find is that nearly half goes into low-carbon power generation, so renewables and nuclear. Around 1/4 goes into energy efficiency, and all this, of course, for very important reasons, because these are critical technologies for clean energy transitions, of course, and because continued investment into R&D for these technologies that are often at very early stages of adoption or can otherwise further improve in performance is of vital importance. But when it comes to these important clean energy areas, electrification, so batteries, grids, when it comes to carbon capture, utilization and storage, when it comes to bioenergy, when it comes to hydrogen, then what we are seeing is that the global R&D spending in these critical areas falls very much short of the other areas. It's a factor of 3 lower than low carbon power and energy efficiency R&D spending combined, which to us seems somewhat disconnected from the long-term plans of many governments and industries. Now, why are we so concerned about clean energy innovation? Because first and foremost, we think that the net zero emission targets that many governments and industries are putting themselves out for are not viable without a significant push in clean energy innovation. Let me try to visualize this a bit. I mean, of course, we know this somewhat intuitively, but what we have done for the very first time in this report is to actually quantify the innovation needs towards reaching net zero emissions. When you look at where our current plans and targets are headed, then what we need to achieve in the very long run for reaching net zero emissions in 50 years of time, then what we need to reach against the back of, or compared with existing and planned policies, is that we need to reduce global energy and industry related CO2 emissions by around 35 gigatons of CO2 by the year 2070. And when you break this down into the levels of technology maturity, then what you're seeing is that just about 1/4 will come from technologies that are currently mature. Think of hydropower, electric trains, etc. These are mature technologies where the innovation potential is relatively limited. Increasing they will have an important role in our clean energy future, regardless the policy environment, of course, but their additional contribution to net zero emissions is limited to 1/4 in our analysis. When it comes to technologies that are currently at early stages of adoption, then a very heavy burden, around 40% of the CO2 emission savings comes from these type of technologies. That's a very broad category, of course. We're talking about technologies that are currently making small infant steps into the energy markets. Think of hydrogen fuel cells, for example, and then there are other technologies that are more in their advanced adolescence years, if you want. Think about lithium-ion batteries for electric cars. Think about various different forms of renewable energies. Of course, these technologies will play a critical role towards bending this global CO2 emission curves and bringing it decisively down. But when it comes to full decarbonization of the energy sector, going towards net zero emissions, then roughly 1/3 of all emissions savings compared with existing and planned policies would need to come from technologies that are currently either at demonstration or at large prototype stage. I'm thinking here about the technologies that play a particularly important role in decarbonizing heavy industries, decarbonizing long distance transport. Think about for example, CO2 capture at cement plants. Think about hydrogen from electricity used for chemicals production. Think about hydrogen-based steel and various different other technologies. These are the ones that require a significant innovation push if they are meant to play the role that we envisage them to play for a transition towards net zero emissions moving forward. Obviously, the earlier your target to reach net zero emissions, and we've run a faster innovation case that hits net zero emissions by the year 2050 already, the faster you want to reach net zero emissions, the more important the contribution from these kind of technologies that are currently at very early stages of development. Now, the problem with innovation is, of course, that innovation can take a long time. We have seen this in history. The first solar PV cells were demonstrated in the United States in the 1950s, and it took until the year 2015 until they reached 1% of global electricity generation. So this is a very long time it takes for can be a very long time it takes for technologies to make it into the market. There are more successful examples or faster examples. Of course, LEDs have been mentioned. That took roughly 20 years of time until it reached 1% in the first market from the first prototypes that have been developed. But innovation is generally a long drawn out process, and it's not necessarily time that we are having. We have investigated in this particular report the industry sector in particular, where the challenge comes actually from two fronts. One is the fact that the time it takes to innovate is long, and the other one is that the sector cannot absorb these kind of technologies at any point in time. Let me illustrate quickly what it means. Globally, the steel, cement, and chemicals sectors produce around 6 gigatons of CO2 emissions per year, about 1/6 of global energy and industry-related CO2 emissions. Many of these plants have only recently been built, in particular in Asia, China, but also in India. So they have a very long lifetime still ahead of them, typically somewhere around 30 to 40 years. And this means that many of the assets that we currently have in place will continue to be operating for decades. The upside here is that many of these plants will need a major refurbishment much earlier, typically after roughly 25 years or so. So making sure that the technologies that we need, hydrogen, CCUS, etc., are available at the point that these plants reach their investment cycle, and that governments are setting the right incentives to make sure that the sector can absorb these technologies at the time the investment cycle is coming up. At the IEA, we are currently working on a new roadmap for the iron and steel sector that will be launched in fall this year. It will have a special focus on India, so stay tuned really for more insights on that particular point. Now, finally, let me just say that we have released 2 resources with this particular report. One has already been mentioned by Dr. Birol. It's a guide to clean energy technologies, freely available on our website, with more than 400 different technologies mapped out with their performance improvement targets, development initiatives, key actors in each individual area. So we hope this can be useful also for target setting and R&D priorities in India as well as in other countries. The other resource, if you want, is about 5 key principles that we have released with this report, 5 key principles for fast-tracking clean energy innovation. The first one is about prioritizing technology efforts, making sure they're in line with stated goals, tracking their development progress, and continuously adjusting in order to make sure we are staying on track. The second one is about raising public R&D and market-led private innovation. Of course, we recognize that R&D funding money is not the only thing and not the only priority for faster innovation, but obviously funding is critically important to make sure our ambitious targets are being met. The third one is about addressing all links in the value chain, acknowledging the fact that technologies like hydrogen are often dependent on a very sophisticated, very comprehensive value chain, where it's important, of course, to support clean hydrogen production. It's of course important to support the uptake of demand, but it's also important to address all the various different links that occur in the value chain, from production towards transport of hydrogen towards its use in different sectors. The fourth one is about building future-proof networks, making sure that enabling infrastructure for critical technologies like hydrogen, but also electricity when it comes to smart grid technology, is available moving forward. And the fifth one is about working globally for the regional success. Mission Innovation is one of these platforms that helps to share best practices. We at the IEA do it through our technology collaboration programs, to which India is participating in many areas. There's also the Clean Energy Ministerial and other fora in which this kind of exchange of information is taking place and is of vital importance. With that, I'd like to close my presentation and pass back to
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gul, for that stimulating overview of the IEA report, and I think that provides a good foundation for what we're discussing today. We are absolutely delighted now to be able to introduce a keynote speech from a very eminent dignitary. Dr. K Vijay Raghavan has held the post of Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India since 2018. As Chair of the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Council, he He provides expert advice on all key aspects of technology development that are relevant to Indian policy. As a fellow of the Royal Society and many other accolades besides, and continues to be active in his field of biological sciences, which I think gives him a great insight into some of the challenges relating to bioenergy that Timur just mentioned. His insights now into how this report connects to India's work on clean energy innovation will be very welcome and timely. Dr. Vijay Raghavan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, Simon. That's very valuable. And I'm honored to be here with Dr. Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of the IEA, Dr. Timur Gul, my colleagues and friends, Dr. Renu Swarup and Mr. Praveer Sinha, and all others over here. It's a very, very valuable and important occasion, and I'm looking forward also to the following panel discussion. I shall be brief, and I think all the key matters about the report have been very well covered by Timur in his presentation, and Renu Swarup has done an extraordinary job, as always, in conveying what the mission innovation in India has been doing. The mission innovation was set up a few years ago by Renu and colleagues who are here, Dr. Sangeeta Kasturi, and it's really wonderful to see how that's progressed and taken off. And as Fatih pointed out, India's innovation investment in R&D is significantly going up and will continue to go up, particularly in additional new areas such as clean hydrogen. So there are just one other additional point I'd like to mention, that these challenges which we face today are consequence of human energy use for tens of thousands of years. And one of the best places where that's been documented is by a book all of you are familiar with, that is Energy and Civilization: A History by Vaclav Smil. It's important, and I sort of keep this as my regular rereading, because it points out how intricately woven energy use is in the world. And one fundamental lesson which one learns from that is, as we talk about clean energy or clean environment or sustainable development, we constantly over history have been using energy from sources such as the environment or the work of others or fossil fuel in a manner as if it were free. And therefore, we don't build in the costs of using that energy into environmental costs for future generations. And that has been a stark feature of human civilization over tens of thousands of years. Now, the consequences of that is something we can see: greenhouse gases, environmental degradation, and all sorts of consequences on the world. Particularly at the time of this COVID-19 crisis, it is important that we link the responses to the crisis in a holistic manner, which combines attention both to energy and the environment. And in that context, it was really wonderful to listen to the comprehensive summary of Timur's on the IEA Special Report on clean energy innovation, which is absolutely fantastic and which I've been looking through just before this meeting. Now, there are multiple aspects here which I'll very briefly run through. First of all is designing a science and technology-based green economy. As Timur pointed out, this can take time in terms of new innovations catching on, but we can see already that today's technologies, mature technologies, can have an immediate impact if scaled and used. So the challenges to using them on scale here have been analyzed really well in the report, and those are, how do you make those economically viable? And therefore, my suggestion there is that we work with each other, with global governments, to try and factor in the costs of not using clean energy into the pricing mechanisms more and more, so that the costs of clean energy become competitive. Because this is a cost and insurance for the future, which we must try and factor in. Now, as highlighted in the IEA report, the climate mitigation challenge is an important one. Energy innovation is key to fostering new technology and advancing existing ones to meet our climate goals. And this can have long lifetimes in the process. Therefore, we need to accelerate both the deployment of existing technologies and the development of new technologies, and this will be needed. And if the development of new technologies takes time, the time to start really is now. Now, India has taken many unique initiatives. This has, you heard from Renu about this. While the per capita energy use and carbon emissions here are a little over a third of the global average, but even with this background, it's fair to say that India has been leading from the front in clean energy transition. For example, our renewable targets are amongst the most ambitious in the world. And, Fatih mentioned the Ujjwala program. There's now a major push to see whether we can have, cooking connected to 24/7 availability of energy such as solar, so that we actually make it even cleaner and more sustainable in terms of energy costs. Now, we also, in terms of these unique initiatives in India, we need to integrate R&D priorities with broader innovation. And you heard from Renu about the mission innovation. The Clean Energy International Incubation Center, which is hosting this workshop, is also an example of a cutting-edge public-private partnership. And energy research and development will be a strong enabler of our push to have people from all over the world coming in and making in India, and Indian industry also working on renewable energy. Now, Sustainable Development Goal Index, India Index, is also enabling our states to become lead adopters in clean energy efficiency. And India has made significant progress towards making the UN SDG goals, notably Goal 7, which refers to the progress towards achieving energy security and efficiency by increasing sustainable per capita energy consumption while ensuring a reduction in emissions and pollutions. Now, the goal 7, has 3 components: universal access to electricity and clean cooking fuel, increasing share of renewable energy in the country's energy mix, and improving energy efficiency, which has been endorsed in the National Energy Policy. So India's targeted national level programs towards achieving electricity for all, providing increased access to LPG, as you heard, and for now, cleaner cooking and reduced dependency on biomass for households, expanding our energy mix. So we are adopting an approach on competitive and cooperative federalism here towards empowering our diverse states to improve access to clean energy through the SDG index, and this is being implemented by our Niti Aayog. And this is the good news on this is it has helped us to identify unique states such as Sikkim in our northeast to becoming a lead adopter of clean energy, and we want other states to also do this. Now, there are linkages between our approach and the IEA report. You note that we heard from just now from Timur that we have to prioritize, track, and adjust, raise public R&D, market-led private innovation, address all links in the value chain, build enabling infrastructure, and work globally for regional success. And India is focusing on all of these. My office is collaborating with the IIT Delhi School for Public Policy. Ambuj Sagar from there is over here. And we will ensure that these 5 goals, which we are completely in sync with, are taken forward in a big way. So to enable a robust energy data policy and governance in India, we need to improve the collection, consistency, transparency, and availability of energy level data. And this is a major area which all our ministries will work together and drive and push, I'm sure. And Minister R.K. Singh is particularly keen on this. And India's international energy collaboration will only grow in the context of what IEA has brought out, and it's sort of stressed even further by the situation with COVID-19. So I'd like to stop here saying congratulate IEA on this extraordinary report. Kudos to my colleagues here who have done a great job with mission innovation and other programs. And my office is always ready to work with them and with you to make sure that our clean energy challenges are overcome and we go to fruition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. It was very insightful coming from you. It is very right that the challenges what we created for us today are essentially a part of our behavior of yesterday, and we have to figure out that how do we really address the challenge as we move forward. And energy and environment definitely goes together, because energy is a key economic driver, and we see has its strong impact on the environment. And science and based technology design is something which India has been trying to improve over the period of time. So it is something which will help us to address the requirement of the green economy as we move forward. And essentially we have to not to forget that there is a market force which is existing, so we have to be competitive, and then we have to really address the requirement of the market and the scale up. So thank you, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, for sharing your thoughts. It was great as always to hear you speak on these things. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the panel discussion. We have a very diverse panel. The actors who are playing a role in their own way, in their own effective way in different walks of life, essentially focusing on clean energy innovation. So we start with Dr. Sangeeta Kasture. Dr. Sangeeta Kasture has been very active when it comes to the R&D initiative with respect to biotechnology. She is in the Department of Biotechnology. She leads the bioenergy and clean energy innovation, country focal point of mission innovation. And India-US Joint Clean Energy Research and Development Center and BioFuture platform. And she has been working very significantly on the biofuel R&D and how the policies play a key role essentially in this area of clean energy. She has been having a lot of programs at the DBT, and I would request her to share her thoughts on some of the way the prioritization of the government happens in the area of policy, and how does really the mission innovation and some of the initiatives really fit in. Looking at the one of the pillars working kind of work globally, looking at the local regional success. Dr. Kasture, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh Das. I'm very honored to be here for this panel discussion. I thank you and welcome all the panelists from Mr. Ganesh Srinivasan, Dr. Professor Ambush Sagar from School of Public Policy, Mr. Amit Kumar, Mr. Manoj Kumar, CEO Social Alpha, and I think Simon Bennett is also there from IEA. This is very important discussion and topic today. We are engaging with this. As we know that clean energy sector is technology intensive, and it has passed through several innovations, led transformations in the last 5 years. But for accelerated clean energy transition, there is urgent need for translational or deployment of advanced technologies to meet the climate and sustainability goals. And I'm glad to say that Government of India through Ministry of Science and Technology and through Department of Biotechnology, Department of Science and Technology have taken a lot of efforts through various schemes to promote innovations and not even promote, but also translation, the fundamental research into products and processes in last 5 years. Various platforms have been used to address these innovation challenges. The joint funding calls, information sharing, collaborations with international organizations like IEA, and many conducting several workshops for student and scientific exchange have been done. And there are also many schemes, Department of Biotechnology and DST have instruments to promote public-private sector innovation partnership, and that through that partnership we are trying to translate the technologies and accelerate the innovation from lab to field. So these are the some of the areas. And coming to the Mission Innovation Platform, which was launched during Paris Agreement, India has taken a leading role in this multilateral program with activity not only for the R&D and innovation, but also in public sector, and promoting entrepreneurs through by setting up the clean energy incubator, as Dr. Swarup and Dr. Ganesh Das and Mr. Sinha has talked. We need to have entrepreneurship engagement in this, because decentralized energy access is very important in order to have the access to all sector through lowering the risk of investment. We can have large access to energy by decentralized energy, and bioeconomy can play major role for inclusive growth of these various sectors, including farmers, rural sector, to decarbonize the transport sector, for especially for the heavy industries and long distance transport. Vision innovation now coming to this is the phase for phase 1 has gone. There's many accelerated innovations had taken place. Now in phase 2 mode, we are taking forward for going in mission mode programs, where there are ambitious targets in every sectors are targeted, and we are finding out solution. All member countries are finding out solutions to provide for each sector, and India is going to lead this bioeconomy mission that is proposed. We have strong support for ministries from various agencies and line ministries, and also the private sector engagement and public sector units. With this, I think I would stop, and maybe we can discuss later with other panels. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kasture. The remarks were quite great, coming from the initiative the government is doing in this space. And now, actually, the very important thing what happens is when we move from when we kind of innovate a product, the danger when it moves from the prototype to the demonstration stage and then to the commercialization, that is where they typically call as a death zone, where the products fail. And that is where players like Tata Power, Delhi Distribution comes in, wherein when an innovator with limited resource and more of motivation and drive comes and approaches a large company, which is a successful company, the support which this company sees and how it sees the innovation is very critical. So I think this is where I would request Mr. Ganesh Srinivasan to come in. Mr. Ganesh Srinivasan, the CEO of Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited. He has been the CEO since he's come in 2019 at Tata Power Delhi Distribution. Before that, he has been looking after the distribution of Mumbai. Before that, and he has had rich experience in the space of consulting in the area of energy. So, Mr. Srinivasan, can I request you to come intervene here and give your thoughts on what do you think is going to be something which kind of a interface, or the kind of contribution industry can play to really make this movement a kind of realistic and very successful one. So you have to unmute yourself, Ganesh.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh. Can you hear me now? Okay. Good evening to all the panelists, and many congratulations to IEA for releasing a very in-depth report. I think very rightly, as you mentioned, the role that industry and companies like Tata Power Delhi and Tata Power particular is a very critical role, because even in the report, one of the, as I read the executive summary, almost half of the technologies that are required for a zero emission scenario are not yet reached the market today. And if we have to reach the zero emission scenario by 2050, half of what is needed for that is not yet in place, or not yet tested and deployed. So that's where I feel a company like Tata Power Delhi, Tata Power play a huge role in giving the opportunity to prototype, demonstrate, and a platform for the companies to test their technologies, and also an opportunity to fine-tune the business model. Because I think technology is, of course, a very critical aspect, but the business model is also a very critical enabler to scale up that technology. So I feel that a company like Tata Power can play a very critical role in providing that catalyst and being that catalyst to ensure that the technologies that are being developed see the light of the day and hit the market. And Tata Power has a very rich legacy. Tata Power Delhi, for example, Tata Power itself, I thought I'd like to share here that even when solar was not so fashionable, in 1989, Tata Power along with BP, British Petroleum, had set up a solar factory. So that's way back in 1989. And similarly, we started our rooftop solar journey here in Delhi in somewhere in 2008, 2010 onwards. So we have been early adopters and pioneers in this space and would like to continue to be that, play that role for the industry to grow. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ganesh, and contribute more as the discussion goes on.
Thank you very much, Ganesh. And the critical part is, of course, industry plays its roles on one side, government plays the role on the other side. Then the larger part is, generally for developing uniformity, when you are looking at a situation where very large number of people operate, it's very important to have a policy. Now, when you're talking about policy, what is the right kind of policy to really drive things, and how do you really address policies when you are talking about different lines of, as we call it, as a value chain, as has been demonstrated also one of the principles. And how do you really work on looking at raising the public R&D and then really bring academics into the forefront? I have with me Mr. Dr. Ambuj Sagar. He's been in the area of working in the area of innovation for a very long time. He's very passionate about it. I've seen it, and he has some very, very disruptive thinking ideas, essentially, which typically you don't hear from somebody who drives or has a very strong interest in policies. A very welcome Don. He is the Vipula and Mahesh Chaturvedi Professor of Policy Studies at the Indian Institute of Technology. He has established the School of Public Policy in 2018. And what is very interesting is exposure, what he has done before he was at IIT. He has been at Harvard. He has worked with a lot of in the space of R&D, entrepreneurship, and it has been great to really hear his thoughts all the time. So I would just request Ambuj to come in here and then share some of his great ideas. Ambuj.
Thank you. Clearly, we are having some issue with the muting and unmuting with this. Thank you very much
we can hear
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you very much, Ganesh, for that introduction, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here. I think this is a very, very important conversation. I mean, I'm a great believer in the power of energy innovation and a great believer in the role of policy in strengthening energy innovation. I guess let me just say that, from my point of view, when we're thinking about accelerating energy innovation, that really requires two pieces. One is more clean energy innovation, which is effectively greater inputs, greater activities. But the second one is also what I would call better energy innovation, which is more efficient and more effective clean energy innovation, which is the process by which we are taking inputs going into the innovation process, whether it's money or people's time, and translating it into outcomes. And I think this is even more important in COVID times, as we're going to have basically kind of resource constraints. And of course, as the report notes that this requires much more than just R&D. And fundamentally what it requires is, what I believe very much is important, not just for India, but all countries, a clear and consistent energy innovation policy. It takes an overarching perspective on the priorities of where do we want to focus. But very, very importantly, and I think it's particularly important for a country such as India, is how do we improve the organization of innovation activities, improve coordination and collaboration, data collection, how do we understand what is the nature of our human and institutional capacity and how that capacity is being motivated by what kind of policies, what's shaping outcomes. I mean, these are all analytical questions, and it sounds like, I'm speaking like an academic, but it is true that this kind of an understanding of energy innovation processes, I think, is absolutely key to thinking about how do we actually take all the efforts we are making and are able to get much more bang from the buck, so to speak, so that we are able to effectively reach the kind of the outcomes that we want. India has actually done very well in many areas. We talked about the LED, huge success. solar PV, another big success. A lot of these have been deployment centered, and I think part of our thing is also going to be thinking about how to become stronger players in the development of new technologies. And in fact, that the Clean Energy Incubation Center, which is co-hosting this, obviously is a big move by India in that direction of how do you become even generators of new technologies. So basically, I think I'll just stop with that to say that there's a fair amount of good work already going on, but we can always do better. And I think as an academic, I really believe in the power of analytical work in understanding how we are doing energy innovation today and how to do it better, learning from our experiences, learning from international experiences. And I really see a great opportunity actually here for collaboration between the Indian government, academics like me at the IIT Delhi School of Public Policy, and the International Energy Agency, where we can learn jointly how to do better in India. But I think I very much believe that our experiences will also be useful for many other developing countries. Thank you. I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Ambuj, for your thought. It's indeed very important to really improve the coordination, cooperation as important. And for the participant, the good news is the webinar is extended. So we will go ahead with as planned for the panel discussion. Also, as we are in the panel discussion, we request you to send your questions. They have been consolidated, and we'll try to take some questions in the panel discussion. Now, moving from there, the important aspects of energy again as it comes is to see that how does a kind of a research organization translate the kind of direction which the research organizations have into contributing to the journey of clean innovation at the field level. So we have now Mr. Amit Kumar. He is the senior director at TERI. He looks into the social transformation part. Very interestingly, he has been the dean of the TERI University between 2014 and 16, and TERI is one of the universities which has possibly churned out more number of energy experts as probably anywhere TERI have, if I may say so. And then he has 30 years of rich experience in the area of diffusion of cleaner and renewable energy resources and technology solution in India. And what I really understand from him after having met him for so many years is he has got a very great understanding on application of energy in the area of energy efficiency and things like that. Also, he has a very good understanding and passion of the way hydrogen as a technology would emerge. So I would request him to just give his thoughts essentially for looking at how do we really raise the public R&D system, how does the market-led private innovation can also excel, and the R&D organization also can gel with the kind of efforts which has been happening all around. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Das. Good evening, everyone. And I must also thank IEA and other organizers to give me this opportunity. I think my visit to Paris to contribute a short while for this particular report must be the last overseas travel that might have taken by me before the world went topsy-turvy. So coming over to the particular issues that Dr. Das raised and that he wants me to tackle. So let me first come to the applications part, because I am always biased towards applications of technology rather than the technology per se. Yes, it is very important that the technology and innovation in clean energy technologies happen, because then only actually we can design any application around that. But innovation do not end at the innovation at technology level only, and these go beyond that. And each and every specific technological application for each and specific technology requirement takes its own course. And I would think that if we were to look at solar energy, so yes, innovation in solar PV technology helped bring down the cost to the level that it has today. But now we also need to think into how that low-cost solar PV could be actually brought into application in much wider scale. Yes, at rooftop level, at larger plants level, that is already happening. But as Mr. Praveer Sinha also raised very important point touching upon decentralized applications. So I think those are the kind of places where innovations, both in terms of technology as well as in business, are required, are happening. Clear-cut examples are Energy Efficiency Services Limited going into joint venture for setting up decentralized solar power plants, or for example, Tata Power itself going for thousands of microgrid. So these are the mainstream commercial companies who are now actually trying to innovate into commercial models and business models beyond technology innovation. TERI itself has gone into hybridization of power looms in Varanasi, where it went into technology as well as business innovation. So I think these are the kind of things which need to be looked more carefully, because then only the wider propagation of whatever innovation is taking place would happen. I'm pretty sure that the startups that are working with Social Alpha and the incubation center that has been established are also working on the application side. And other advantage of looking at application side is also that then scope for your innovation increases, because then one start looking at multiple levels of value chain. Value chain at the level of technology development and value chain at the level of application of that technology for different applications. So that was my one point. And second is, as far as opportunities of the skill set that we are developing in India are multiple. We have a very good manufacturing base to offer. We have very good engineering base to offer. And more importantly, we also not only have large demand, but also we know how to aggregate those demands to help take these innovation forward. So LED was being talked about, and also was talked about was Ujjwala. So I think these are the kind of places where one would definitely look into innovations. I am very happy that PSA talked about cleaner cooking. And I would believe that cooking is one place where we need to look into going beyond cleaner, that is Ujjwala, and looking into absolute clean innovations in cooking, such as based on solar. So with that, I would stop here, Dr. Das, and we will take any question if it comes forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amit. I really, the application is the key, because application means somebody has accepted the idea and then started going with it. Now the interesting part is when we are having the very interestingly touch about the all links of the value chain. I thought that was a very interesting pillar which IE has identified, and the value chain essentially is very specific to a country. For instance, one value chain will depend on the skill of a particular country and how does he really play a part in that value chain and then possibly get into a global cooperation. And interestingly to see that how it goes to the market is something to be looked at. So I would now request Mr. Manoj Kumar to come in, and Manoj has been in the area of, I would say, practical demonstration of how innovation is translated into success. I think if I may put that sentence, I think it is more appropriate for that. He's a founder, a co-founder and chairman of Social Alpha. He is also a senior advisor at the Tata Trust, where he is responsible for nurturing innovation portfolio, also kind of facilitating and promoting entrepreneurship and nurturing academic and R&D activities, which is a very critical role the trust plays in this space. And what I would like to maybe check with Manoj, that if you are looking at all the players of taking innovation to the market to succeed and really translate, who do you think is going to play the biggest and possibly the most effective role, or maybe who is the single actor who would possibly require most of the support from all the players we are talking about? Over to you, Manoj, please. Manoj, you are muted. Manoj, you are muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Das. I was muted. Yeah, it's working now. Greetings to all the panelists. And it's been a great discussion, starting from partnerships and policy and the entire value chain. I want to draw attention to two parts. And when we build the Clean Energy International Incubation Center in partnership with Government of India and Tata Power and Tata Trust, the whole idea was to take energy innovations from lab to market, right? And when you take innovations from lab to market, the most important person who needs support is the entrepreneur. So how do we create a culture of energy entrepreneurship that, with the help of all the players in state, private sector, public sector, academia, actually help create solutions which are affordable and provide consumers value, was the biggest question, right? So we did not want to distract from at least the high level statement that SDG 7 has. At the end of it, the whole idea is to provide affordable, clean energy, reliable energy to people, right? And it's not about just switching on one light bulb in a house, but making sure that energy access is integrated with multiple use cases, whether it's healthcare, livelihoods, agriculture, water resource management, or it's education. So the nexus of energy with our life, including industry, commerce, and transportation, is very important. And therefore, we need innovation across all use cases. And when we started Social Alpha Energy Challenge in Clean Energy International Incubation Center, we started with problem statement, and it was not about pushing technologies which were available on the shelf to the community or to the market, but it was about identifying problem statement and curating these problem statement across, whether it's power generation, whether it's energy distribution, whether it's energy storage, or whether it's energy consumption. So while it is extremely important to have innovations that transition from fossil fuel to clean fuel, it's also very important to have energy efficient appliances that drive energy adoption in a middle class household or a poor household. So we cannot ignore, right, different stages of energy. We need better storage. We need more efficient distribution. We probably need decentralized production and consumption and distribution. So we opened it up to all innovators. And in line with, the desire for net zero carbon emissions, we ensured that the net zero carbon emissions are integrated in our evaluation process. So thanks to partners like RISE Sweden, we managed to build this as part of evaluation, so that the innovators that we select for incubation in Clean Energy Incubation Center are actually contributing to the cause. We also made sure that enough capital is available at early stage. Eventually, when you have a successful solution that everybody wants to buy and has an economics, and that time, multiple players are interested, whether they are strategic investors from existing corporations or venture investors or private equity. But the real problem is in the early stage, when these solutions are at best lab prototypes, and we are still trying to push them through the pilots and validations in the market and field. And that is where we need early stage capital that can convert these lab prototypes into solutions that people want to use and assign a value to. I think that has been the most important characteristic of Clean Energy Incubation Center, that we superimpose the Social Alpha incubation and acceleration model on the top of it. And therefore, I am increasingly, talking about and increasingly, pointing out the importance of entrepreneurs in this whole effort. Until and unless we can attract and support entrepreneurs, we cannot really make a significant impact in this space. And entrepreneurship is that the only remaining gap between energy prosperous society and innovations which are happening in the lab. And Clean Energy Incubation Center is trying to bridge that gap. I will take a pause here, and then probably we can talk more about it.
Thank you, Manoj. And what you said is a very practical dimension of what typically an innovator in this space and faces. And one of the interesting thing is that largely, if you look at the technology of energy, it has got a larger gestation period than any other kind of technology. So the support is extremely important to do that. Having heard the experts at different walks of the industry and innovation, what is very important is to also see that how do we really develop understanding from different parts of the world, geographies and experiences, and how do we really bring together to at a common platform or summarize in such a fashion that it becomes easy for us to absorb the learning and take the next step forward. And this is where I feel IEA has been doing a great job. Many things which has really forced people to go back, and then many of the managers who are really busy doing things rather than doing analysis, IEA has helped them to really sit and then take attention to some of the things which they are reflected. They would come in, and we have with us Dr. Simon Bennett, who has been the analyst, energy supply and investment outlook at IEA. He leads the work on energy, technology, innovation, investment and policy under the Clean Energy Transition Program. And he was previously in the European Commission Director General for Energy, where he was responsible for the carbon capture and storage, CCS projects and policy. And also he's worked in the area of smart grid. And I would request Simon to come in at this point in time. And possibly, I don't want to say that you link whatever has been said by the panelists to the report, but essentially I just want to share your experience that everything essentially converges to a few points where we all have to focus. Dr. Bennett, if I may request you, please.
Okay, thank you very much. You've left me with no easy task to synthesize some of this, but it is certainly true that this great panel, the people who've spoken here today, have actually touched on most, I think, of the important points that we came up against during our thinking in the preparation of the report. I think what we did doing this report was we tried to take things that have just been mentioned, undertake the analysis and bring that in a relatively easy to understand way to the level of decision makers in the public and private sector. And there's two main aspects to that. One is that we looked at this idea of problem statements that Mr. Kumar was just talking about, but we looked at it at the global level. What are the applications? Mr. Amit Kumar's applications that need to be fulfilled by technologies in order to reach deep emissions reduction in a secure and resilient energy system. And so we quantified that, and Timo presented some of that earlier. But the other thing that we wanted to do was to pick up on what Professor Saga was saying about the innovation process, and to bring this sort of complex process to decision makers and explain to them that actually successful countries that are innovating in energy, which has a lot of very particular features, they are covering a number of key pillars of policy. And it's not just R&D funding, but they are encouraging entrepreneurship that we've just talked about. The government and the private sector are working hand in hand. I think this is something that Dr. Kasture already mentioned, and that the private sector is, has an incentive to bring new technologies into the market and therefore nurture and incubate the ideas coming out of the startups and the researchers, which is what Mr. Srinivasan was talking about. So we cover a number of these points, and we've tried to sort of present them in a easy to communicate way. But what's been most rewarding about this conversation, I think, is to see how these global statements that we've made are resonating at a national level. And I think India is a particularly interesting context, and Dr. Birol mentioned this earlier, because so much of future global energy demand is going to come from emerging markets. We've identified these 400 or so key technologies that would be needed for decarbonization, but they have very specific applicability in the Indian context in terms of whether they're appropriate at their current pathway of development for the climate, for the energy system, for these things. So it's really rewarding for us to see these conversations being taken up at the national level, and particularly in India. I think I would just pick up on a couple of things that were in our 5 core principles that I think have been touched on here and could be taken forward. And we've already spoken about this MOU that we hope to re-sign with the government of industry to move forward collaborative approaches. I think there's opportunities for a lot of collaboration with the speakers who've talked today. The first point is around this kind of principle number 1 on prioritize. And when we speak to governments around the world, whether they're in advanced economies, emerging markets, developing countries, our sense is that nobody has the silver bullet perfect answer for this concept of how do you identify what your technology portfolio needs to be that you're going to support. but prioritization is nevertheless essential, and governments are central to the support of technologies. So we think that there's an opportunity to share best practice among different countries in terms of how they identify the place in the value chain that they want to be for the technologies that are going to be appropriate for their base of capital and of skilled resources as well. And that's a piece of work we'd be very keen to take forward, in combination with this idea of how do you evaluate what are the policies that are appropriate for those technologies and whether or not they work. And I think that speaks to Professor Saga's concept of better innovation as well. The other aspect that we've noticed recently is a number of countries, and it's not just India, are really getting interested in this idea of how do they support entrepreneurs, how do they participate in the flow of capital that's going to clean energy innovation startups, for example. And one of the points here is that energy often has a longer incubation time because of its capital intensive nature. These are often hardware technologies, it's not software, it's not healthcare. And that has particular requirements in terms of the patience of the capital. And governments are rightly identifying that they could play a role in making sure this capital flows in the right way and is supportive, and can ensure that corporate venture capital can also nurture startups. But again, it's not obvious that any government has exactly the right approach here. The International Incubation Center is obviously one unique approach, but we'd be very keen to help India to share that experience with other countries and to learn at a global level about what the best approaches might be. Obviously, I think there's plenty to discuss around what these future projects might look like, and also we'd be keen to answer any questions about the report itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. We have received a lot of questions, but we will just, since we have some restriction on the timings, I've just picked up few questions and I've tried to put some similar questions in a same thought. So I would like to, maybe there's one question which has come essentially on India's ability to take risk with respect to technology. For instance, we have seen that typically if you look at any sector, the technology lands here, they last. It is, once it is used in US, used in Europe, then it lands here. Similarly, I mean, you look at any of the verticals, it happens mostly on that. So is it that we are a little afraid to take risk with respect to new technology, or is it that the cost is going to be very high? Is it that the kind of a policies and procedures stops us to do that? I'll probably request Ambuj to give his thoughts, given his experience in this space and his understanding. Ambuj, can I request you to reflect here, please?
Sure. I think I'm going to answer this question in two ways. One is, I think it's natural that for a new technology, the risk generally is taken by the people who are more capable of taking the risk. In other words, who have the financial resources and also the other institutional resources that actually can manage the risk. And it turns out that a lot of the innovation investments are made in industrialized countries. That's where the technologies are getting developed. They have greater institutional infrastructure to manage risks. So a lot of the work actually happens there. Having said that, I actually think that the risk with technology is not just in the development of new technologies, but actually even the implementation of technology in a new context always has some risk associated with it. In fact, when we use the word innovation, at least in the academic arena, innovation means both new to the world, but also new to a context. Because application of a technology in a new context by definition requires some tweaking of the technology and some management of risk. And so in any area where India actually has been very aggressive or very much in the front in terms of implementing new technologies, whether it's solar PV or LEDs and so on, or energy efficient appliances and all of that, there were risks involved in that process. And I think we've actually managed the risk. Sometimes it's financial risk. We manage that through, for example, the reverse auction process in solar PV. In the case of technical risk, you actually work very well with the manufacturers to make sure that you're sorting through the technical aspects. In market risk, you're making sure that you're actually going on reaching out to the users. So, for example, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency did this very big reach out to consumers about energy efficient appliances. So I guess the point I want to make is that even in an Indian context, you still have to think about risk. Technical risk, market risk, financial risk, and you have to think intelligently about how to manage that risk, because this energy transition, every country is going to engage in this transition in its own way, and there is no getting away from the fact that you have to think about risk. It may be different from the risk for completely new technologies, but having said that, I think some of the same principles apply here also.
Thanks, Sambuj, for your thoughts. Now, maybe to Dr. Kasturi, I will. There's a question which I would like to ask her is, see, a lot of the laboratories, government laboratories work a lot on technologies. They work on clean coal technologies, they work on converting usage of coal ash and then waste to energy, a lot of things. Now, when there is a time for those technologies, what they worked and translated that into some sort of project, they want to bring it to the commercial space. They struggle, in the sense, large companies, because the objective of a corporate is little different, which includes the public sector company corporate also. I'm not talking about private sector, because the question is giving example of the public sector corporates we are talking about. So what do you think, something which the government can do to really help these kind of technologies come to the marketplace? Can mission innovation or some similar programs could be of help here?
Yes, this is very valid question, Dr. Das. Before coming to this question, I would like to make my comment on the de-risking of this high technology projects. For example, I can say for the bioenergy, there are definitely programs for the high investment cost projects for new technologies. That is called viability gap funding, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Yojana. Such schemes are available for where government is also taking a partnership. The government is also giving some grants where they are encouraging private sector engagement, public sector engagement and investment in large projects, and some 15 to 25% share can be taken by government in order to de-risk these high cost projects. Coming to this entrepreneurship, it's very important that all these startups and all, they get market access, and there are schemes available. I can quote example of BIRAC. BIRAC has done, which is a Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council, so which is working for the mostly for biopharma sector, where the innovations, these innovators are coming out innovations and they get market access also. There are linkages provided, so that BIRAC is providing ecosystem where these all entrepreneurs, they can be linked to the market, and through this international collaboration, through this incubator, we can expand this. There is a sister innovation hub. Through that, we can connect these to international markets also. That is another possibility too.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Kasturi. Of course, there is an option for us to reach out to us, maybe to take more details and how we can help you with the program. You can always reach out. Now we have been talking about hydrogen as an option. It's very interesting. It is clean, and there's a lot of promise which is been expressed by large companies also and across geography. But with respect to India, in the mobility sector or otherwise, will it become a reality in say 2030 or what's 2030? Amit, what do you think? You have worked in this area. Do you think that hydrogen is going to be an important source and or an enabler for us in the future?
Definitely. If we are looking at energy transition in broader sense, so then we have to think beyond electricity. So in that scenario, whether we are talking of transportation requirement or whether we are talking of requirements in different industrial processes as such, I think hydrogen definitely is going to take a central place in all those places. So we simply can't wish away hydrogen and green hydrogen particularly.
Okay, thank you, Amit. So the next question is essentially on the global solar tariff and the solar energy which has been generated. So it is now felt that the solar energy tariffs need not be subsidized. It has come down low, but actually the solar tariff has to essentially cross to the wires and reach the consumer end of the day. And this is going to be quite a challenge, the kind of challenge which exists in the entire value chain, which has been also pointed out by the IEA report. You have to look at every link in the value chain. It is going to be very critical to look at that, how this tariff or whatever economies of scale we develop at at the start of the value chain, how does it really translate and convert into a requirement or a need or address a need of the customer? How do you think, Ganesh, if I may ask you that this kind of challenge where the tariff of solar is coming down and the distribution sector and the transmission has to do its job of reaching it out and to provide energy access, which we have heard for rural, urban, everywhere. How do you think that we can strike a balance between the cost of generation or when an innovation brings down the cost, and end of the day the market forces gives that cost, addressing all requirement of the players in the value chain?
Yeah, Dr. Ganesh, I think the solar tariffs today are already quite competitive in India. Professor Ambuj also referred to the due to the reverse auction process. Of course, there are some elements of appropriate transmission pricing, etc., which are still not fully factored in, but nevertheless, it is very, very competitive. From a distribution company's perspective, or for really scaling it up, the storage, which is something that is a very critical aspect today and also has been highlighted in the IEA report as well as a very critical driver for the future. I think that is the real any drastic change in the costs of storage will help broad-based solar substantially. Today we are limited by the extent of load that we have in during the daytime. Also, obviously, because it's infirm, we have associated challenges with solar. So I think storage will play a very big role, and we have already seen several tenders, particularly storage, solar and wind in hybrid, solar, wind and storage of different forms, whether hydro or battery storage, come up by SECI. So I think it is a matter of time before the right cost structure as well as the right technology is identified, and that's something that will really help broad-base grid scale solar. Of course, the rooftop solar is also picking up with a lot of emphasis given by the government and by MNRE. So there again, it's the question of integration and ensuring that whether with respect to the traditional grid that we have, how do we manage the additional solar? How do we manage or how do we understand what investments are appropriate to make in the network? How do we integrate new dimensions such as electric vehicle load due to electric vehicles, etc. I think these are the different challenges that will help as we go, which need to be figured out and ironed out as we go ahead.
Thank you, Ganesh. And when it comes to say innovating something, and then how do you really put it into demonstration piloting? Manoj, you talked about the importance of giving the capital at an early stage, but that is not the only level, because one may not have all the companies like Tata Power or Tata Power DDL who will not ask the questions that what is in it for us, or they will not put a calculation on the resources they are putting in while demonstrating or while looking at the pilot. So how do you think that what could be a few things which you feel the corporate should do, the academic should do, because academic also contributes a lot with respect to technology and innovation. How many comes to light is to be seen, because there is a limited commercialization possible. What do you think that some of the things which could be done at the industry level, at the government policy level, or the academic level to see that this innovation really translates into success stories? You are muted, Manoj. You're still muted.
I can't control. I think I can't control the mute thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. So Ganesh, if you look at the report, IEA report, it talks about 35% of emission reduction potential lies in the early stage innovation, and nearly 50% is the one that has not reached the market. So basically, we are saying that 85% of the innovation, as per the report, is at a stage where it has not seen the market. So you need a lot of capital in pilots, validation, and demonstration stage. And since the opportunity cost of capital is very high, the curation has to be extremely good. And that is where the industry, the academia, and the grassroots level organizations all need to come together in order to curate and validate the problem statements which we are trying to solve. Because if you have limited capital, you can't spread it thinly across multiple innovations. So it is not about taking 1,000 technologies to market and giving everybody a small amount of money. It's about identifying the best of the solutions, not just the technology, identifying the best of the solutions which we can fund. And therefore, this collaboration between public sector, private sector, academia, industry, and organizations like TERI and people who work in energy access, it's extremely important that they all get together, convene, and curate the problem statement which we are going to promote. This is extremely important because we have seen in the sector, capital is not enough. The second thing is, how do we use blended finance models, right? So, for example, at the prototyping stage or early demonstration stage, you may need grant, which thankfully Mission Innovation, BIRAC, and some of the government organizations provide, along with some philanthropic organizations. But what about capital for go-to-market? What about capital for tweaking the solutions further and continuously iterating solutions? And that is where the capital is needed. And at the maturity stage, you again have enough capital coming in, because then the business case or the economics is proven, right? So I think, if you look, this is a multi-stakeholder paradigm. Everybody need to come and contribute their respective intellectual strength and financial strength to this cause. Otherwise, we would be basically only doing prototypes and pilots with the kind of money we can allocate to this.
Thanks, Manoj. That is very useful. Simon, you have heard the sides, expression, and expectations. Now, what do you think that IEA and possibly Government of India and the players you have heard speaking can do in the next maybe 1 year, 2 year to set up few things for India, or maybe few things? I'm not saying that we want to do only for India. India is looks at global partnership all the time, and looks at a larger kind of population, not only from who are citizens of India. What do you think that some of the things we feel that we can do, and then possibly IA can collaborate with Government of India to do in the next couple of years?
So it's certainly the question that we're keenest to explore, I think, coming out of having launched this report to the Indian audience today, and having the opportunity to hear the views of everybody giving opening remarks, and also on the panel discussion as well. I don't think that we have a shopping list of things from the IEA that we want to achieve. This is a two-way conversation. It's an area that we're getting more resources, more interest for at the IEA, looking at the problems related to clean energy innovation policy, as it relates to the things I mentioned earlier: prioritization, evaluation, entrepreneurship. And I think that marries quite nicely with some of the questions that are being asked at a policy level and by the private sector in India. And we would be very keen to follow up after this with some conversations with all of the speakers, but certainly with the Department for Biotechnology, on how some of these questions, not necessarily how to answer them finally, but how we can do what Fatih Birol was talking about exchanging best practices between countries, looking at the available evidence, and making sure that the evidence base is there for making decisions and taking these forwards. The importance, I think, of having an energy innovation strategy that is embedded at the heart of energy policy is becoming increasingly important. This is not something that has always been done in all countries and all ministries in the past, but the report certainly lays out how important new technologies are going to be in order to meet some of the higher level policy targets. And if you're going to be interested in pushing forward new technologies for these core policy targets like climate change, but also energy security and energy access, then you're going to need to make sure that you've got very strong linkages between all of the stakeholders that are relevant to these problems. And I think that includes the sources of capital that are appropriate for the different stages of the innovation process. And it goes right through to the market-based policies related to standards and public procurement, as we've heard has worked well in industry, that pull private sector capital into these early stage technologies as well. And we've been looking at the venture capital data globally, but also for India, and the trends are broadly similar. We are seeing an increase in private capital, especially from corporates, going into technologies where there is a clear sense of direction set up by governments in terms of turnover of the technology stock, and that's most apparent in mobility. So there's a lot of money going into clean mobility solutions, electric vehicles and batteries, and it's partly because the industry itself recognizes that there's this pressure to change and it's going to need to refresh itself. And I think there's opportunities to do some of that kind of market pull policy work across other sectors as well. It's not only applicable to the Indian context, but we'd be very keen to explore how the very unique context in India, I think, with the need to adapt and adjust some of these technologies for a very large market, how that maps on then to the existing capacities and skills and the learnings from other countries. I don't think that that's pinpointed specific answers to your question, Ganesh, but I hope it gives us some food for follow-up discussions.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. That is useful. So it is very evident that essentially the success of an innovation is when it really translates into a solution for ultimately the end consumers, or we address a problem. And then definitely, various technology and its application, different role played by all the actors, not one. And then the role that played by the actor would vary depending on what kind of expertise each bring in and what is the kind of challenge one has. Is extremely important application of technology. And what is important is how do we really work together to really make sure that it translates into a success. And it's a difficult task. That is where we look forward to the government to come in, the private sector. There are a lot of dimensions of corporate social responsibility as well as investment in R&D, which goes, and there is a different outlook from the private sector also towards this. And of course, academics play the role to bring in people and also bring in some element of value system within the students, so that they actually look at innovation and addressing solutions rather than only looking at job as an option. I think this is very important to see. With that, I would like to thank the panelists and close the discussion for a very interesting and a thoughtful expression from all of you. And I would hand it over back to you, Simon, to conclude from the IAA side. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for an excellent chairing and moderation of the panel discussion, Ganesh. I think that was a very interesting discussion. There's really not much more for us to say in closing the event, but we've certainly highlighted that this is an area of energy policy, and the IEA looks at all of the different aspects of energy policy. This is an area that has perhaps got uncertainty most closely at the heart of it. There are no certain guarantees when it comes to funding and promoting innovation. So the watchword that we have, or the catchphrase, is that we're trying to raise the chances of innovation success. And we've come up with some pillars across which policy can work in order to do that. We see good practices in different countries, but there's clearly a lot more work that can be done in this area to take forward what is in essence a global report and make it appropriate for different countries. I thank everybody on the line for having stayed with us this long. If you're still out there, it's been a really great discussion. And please, if you have particular questions, certainly for the IEA, then don't hesitate to get in touch. The report is free to download from our website. Thanks to everybody, and hopefully speak to you all again soon.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Dr. Das. Thank you, all panelists. Look forward to.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.